If you don't have the infrastructure to store it, to use it, to regasify it once it comes off the ships, how are you going to feed your people? Welcome back. There's a lot to talk about, specifically in the commodity markets and the energy space.
Let's get into Europe's looming energy crisis.
And if you enjoy the pod, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. Europe dodged a bullet last year. They had a warm winter and they were running out of natural gas supply. They got lucky. Despite having an above averagely warm winter, they were still subsidizing homeowners' electrical bills. Post World War II, Europe's been going through periods of having an abundance of oil and gas, 2 periods of rationing, 2 periods of desperately looking for new sources, 2 periods of trying to make deals with sometimes questionable governments in faraway lands just to supply their people with the energy they need. It's coming to a head now because Russia obviously was supplying Europe with 40% of their natural gas. Now they've been looking for new sources, and who has stepped up in a huge way has been the US. The problem is the US only has so much capacity. They've now become the energy superpower of the world, particularly when it comes to natural gas. And the US can only supply so much to Europe and all the other countries that rely on it, including its own domestic demand, which is the largest in the world. It's not just only about finding new supply to replace Russian supply. They have infrastructure challenges such as where do they store it? For example, they only have so much storage capacity. The question now is if it becomes a cold winter again, or if it becomes a cold winter back to historical norms. Last year was above average warm winter for Europe. What happens this year? Last year, it was estimated they spent about $500 billion on electrical subsidies.
Yeah, they can't play that game again. The debt ratios in Europe are totally out of control.
The conundrum right now is this. People say, okay, natural gas, well, they can just use coal. Nope, they've been shutting down their coal plants. Well, nuclear, well, they don't have enough nuclear. Those build-outs are 10, 15, 20 years. And
Germany's decommissioned. Germany decommissioned all its nuclear. So they are shutting down nuclear as well. They shut down coal. They're shutting down nuclear.
Which is crazy. Here's why natural gas is so critical. Fertilizers, for example. Natural gas is used to create ammonia, which is one of the key ingredients in nitrogen fertilizer. So if you don't have an abundant supply of natural gas, and that doesn't mean just, okay, we'll call America, we'll get the natural gas. No, it means you have to call America to get the natural gas, and then you have to store it for all your needs throughout the year. If you don't have the infrastructure to store it, to use it, to regasify it once it comes off the ships, how are you going to feed your people? Obviously, the US is sitting very, very pretty right now. They have been building out LNG terminals better than anyone for the last 15 years. You wrote a piece about this like 10 years ago.
Yeah, the 4 nat gas horsemen.
And who were they?
It was Canada, Russia, Australia, and the United States, and the US has who's
out now? So Germany came over to Canada for a few different reasons, but one of the topics of conversation between the leadership was shipping natural gas from the east coast of Canada. Trudeau said there wasn't a business case for it. Okay. Yeah. So Russia's out because they have to be. Canada's out because we don't have the infrastructure to get natural gas to Europe.
Listen, Canada missed the boat in so many ways. It's hard to even comprehend. The billions. I mean, we should be one of the richest nations on the face of the earth. We should have a sovereign wealth fund that's exploding, bursting at the seams. So much money for First Nations, for any social programs. Canada just missed it. It's such a shame.
So you have Russia, who's been basically
revenue.
Blocked. Yeah, so you have Russia, who's blocked out of the market. You have Canada, who, maybe in a couple of years, Kitimat's up and running. It's a massive investment, $35 billion, but it's not in play right now. So Canada's out. Australia's natural gas largely goes to Asia. So America's left as the energy superpower of the world, but the critical element for Europe's survival and sovereignty.
I mean, you've seen Macron and these guys furious over what the Americans have been charging the EU for their natural gas, right? As soon as that pipeline went down, premiums exploded 20, 30, 40%, massive increases.
The challenge for America is this. All of a sudden, we're now the superpower of the world for energy, at least natural gas.
Yeah. They always were. I mean, well, they took
Americans,
over that. They took over the oil title under Trump, and now
Yeah.
they've taken over the natural gas title under Biden.
Exactly. But the issue for America is this: Americans will not tolerate expensive energy. They won't tolerate it. So now these American LNG companies are tempted because they can go get 2, 3, sometimes 400% more in Europe or Asia for the natural gas than they can domestically. But they can complain about American pricing all they want. All the EU has to do is build their storage facilities up. 1,000% increase. Do it now. This is so European. During the 1970s oil crisis, France, one of their government agencies, made a law where they put all these regulations in place on how their energy companies were allowed to advertise, what words they were allowed to say, what images they were allowed to show in ads. They did it because they didn't want any sort of messaging that encouraged energy consumption. Total was reprimanded by the French government in the 1970s for the most benign ad that the French government read into and thought, okay, this is going to encourage our people to use more oil, to drive more. And so they reprimanded Total for that in the 1970s. This is very European. This goes back 50 years.
Many of the former, Gabon being the most recent in West Africa, the former colonies in Africa, France's former colonies in Africa, there's been 8 coups in Africa in the last 3 years. The most recently coming in Gabon, extremely rich in oil and gas, minerals, bordering the Democratic Republic of the Congo. French is the national language. All their diplomats booted out. Now, it had been run by a corrupt family for the last 15, 20 years or whatever. But you're seeing these militaries rise up, and you have to believe that there's a bit of a connection there. As the US kind of fades, and I don't want to say, looks inward, but becomes, everybody's got their own problems to deal with, okay, in this inflationary environment with debt spiraling out of control and all the rest. And the instability that we're seeing in Africa is peaking. Look at the war in Sudan, what's happening right now with the rebels. Niger, the coup, we're talking about tens of millions of people destabilized, the trillions in natural resources that are in play right now in Africa, that where the West always kind of had a bit of a horse in the race or had a bit of control is completely slipping through. Countries like France that used to be able to travel freely and negotiate deals, those days are over. And you're seeing Russia and China increase their influence more and more in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo and other nations. And as these military juntas take over, the landscape in Africa is changing. And there's going to be massive ramifications as it relates to energy, natural resources.
If we look back at Europe, they would be well advised to get back in line with America and tighten their relations with America ASAP. If they're trying to block out Russia forever from taking on their natural gas, because they're trying to wean off it, they haven't weaned off it all the way. America is the nat gas superpower of the world, and that's not going to change for 30 years. And this is what frustrates, I think, a lot of Europeans, certainly would frustrate me if I was European, is they will go out and invest in all these renewables, which are intermittent. They're not a base load power source right now, solar, wind, that sort of stuff. They're even looking into hydrogen, which is a whole nother beast. There's no scalability there. They're looking at all these other options. They're spending all this money, and their Critical Minerals Act was smart, but they should be doing stuff like that with natural gas. And it starts with increasing their storage capacity, increasing their long-term nat gas contracts with America, because America's capacity is only going to increase, their exporting capacity, and then they protect their sovereignty once again.
So what's your thesis? Go all in on North American oil and gas producers?
Well, specifically, I'm very bullish on American LNG exporters. All right, that about wraps it up. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.